Hello again, you sick, twisted weather freaks, and welcome to another fun-filled, action-packed, and intellectually stimulating edition of This Week in Weather. I'm your host and meteorologist, DT, from WX Risk here in Central Virginia, the Colonel of Confusion, the Captain of Catastrophe, the Commander of Chaos. Let's talk about this week in weather. And this is the December 29th, 30th edition, Sunday night, Monday morning. And I'll start out by taking a look at my picture of my smiling face in Richmond, Virginia. There's my two emails. You want to reach me? You can always do that. There's the new Twitter page. There you go, right in here. Yay. I had a problem with the Twitter page before. It got hacked, and too many attempts, so they shut it down. So I have this new one up here, which you can find. And again, it talks mostly about Eastern U.S. operational weather. And of course, there's the Facebook page. Now, this is what the actual, in case you haven't seen it yet, there you go. Nice snowstorm map here in Virginia, North Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee, southern half of West Virginia. So it's, there you go, and of course the new snowstorm page over on the website. All right, so let's talk about what's going on here in the weather-wise. We'll start by taking a look at the temperatures here. This is the normal precipitation since December 1st, and we can see that there's been a general area of dryness, in this area and here, below normal, anywhere from I don't know, 5 to as much as a 50% of normal rainfall in this whole area from Texas up into the Mississippi Valley. The Dakotas, Minnesota, a lot of snowstorms up in here so far. Kind of dry in the northern Rockies, Pacific Northwest. A lot of activity in California, the Great Basin, and of course, good areas of rain on the East Coast. You have a lot of southeast activity, but then a little below normal Pennsylvania, Virginia, northern New York. Kind of mixed bag here in the Northeast. That's since December 1st. Temperatures. All right, the upper left image is the last 7 days. You can see that it has been warm relative to normal. Look at this stuff. This red stuff in here, that's 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. That's pretty damn impressive. Now, for the month, this is the month here, since December 1st. Again, 3 to 6 degrees above normal for the month. The only real cold places actually has been the Northeast a little bit, close to normal there. Okay, let's take a look at the evening radar here. You can see our monster storm. We have our big area of low pressure, which is located obviously somewhere here in Minnesota and Iowa. In this area right here somewhere. And then here's our southerly winds bringing up the rain and storms. A lot of rain in here. And there's the snow and near blizzard conditions like that, which is pushed into western Iowa and western Minnesota. And there's our next system on the west coast. Now, if we take a look at the surface map, this is interesting because this here is the surface map from Sunday afternoon, and you can see the main low is located over southern Minnesota. And we can see a warm front bringing the rain here, the showers to the mid-Atlantic states there. And we have one cold front here and another cold front here. Okay, well that's fine, but this here is the surface map from this morning, and from 4 a.m. 4 a.m. this morning, and you can see the low has moved very little. Look at that. And that's because the system is trapped. This is the upper air map here. So when we talk about a closed 500 low, this is what we're talking about. See this feature here? See all the little contours around it? That's the closed 500 low. There's another one right there. There you go. That's over southeastern Canada. And then we have these other big vortexes up in here. Now, these are known as polar or Arctic vortexes. This here is the actual polar vortex right in this area here. You can see it's in northwest Canada, which is never a good sign for the East Coast. Now, we do have some blocking here. See the positive anomalies? But it's also over the East Coast. So we don't have any Arctic oscillation, which is negative. We don't have the Greenland block. We just have this block here over south central Canada, which is keeping the big low here over Minnesota from moving very rapidly. Now, as we move out further in time, so this is now the upper air map takes us into Tuesday evening. So what happens is the upper low, which you can see over Minnesota, let me call it up so you can see it again. There's Minnesota, Iowa, right? Okay, that's where it is on this afternoon. And then by Tuesday, you can see that system has now moved over the eastern Great Lakes and into, I guess, southeastern Canada or western New York State. But look at this. Another system has developed here in the southwest states over Baja California. Now, that system was actually this piece of energy here. So while everybody's focused on this, don't forget about this piece. So this piece comes digging down here. You can see it very nicely. Let me go and mark it out for some reason. Mark it. Here we go. And you can see that it's coming southward, and it's going to drop in this way, and this is going to track like this. So, and that's in fact exactly what happens. We see here on again on Tuesday afternoon. Now, in both these maps, the polar vortex, as you can clearly see, remains very far to the north. Look at this intense vortex here, way far to the north, north of Baffin Islands in the Arctic Circle, and another piece of it's here. And this is just a terrible pattern for winter weather or wanting sustained winter weather. I mean, sometimes you can get brief shots of winter weather in this sort of pattern, but it's not very impressive. So this system here, we have one ocean low here off the southeast Canada, and this one is coming in behind it, going to replace it. And that's going to provide a little bit of a window down the road. We'll get to that in just a second. All right, so this here is now for Thursday afternoon to Friday morning. There's our next big trough over the west coast of the Rockies. You can see it very clearly right here. There's the trough. This here is another upper low, and this here is your polar vortex. Now notice we have a big ridge here. See this? It's a big ridge. This is the international symbol for ridge, and another one here. So this trough amplifies in between the two features, and the low pressure area that develops here ends up tracking up in the northeast direction. Here it is, the low pressure area now for Thursday night, early Friday morning. There's high pressure off the coast, feeding the south winds here, feeding the moisture in. And what's going to happen is this is now Friday night into Saturday morning, and you can see the cold front is moving through the east coast very strongly. The main area of low pressure, from what I can see, is right here over Lake Huron, and the cold front comes down like this. There may be some thunderstorms on the east coast on Friday night into early Saturday morning with this system. Ahead of this, a lot of south winds going to pull up the warm air and a lot of moisture. So if anything, the temperatures on Friday are probably underdone before the rain hits. Now, as look hemispherically, let me clear this out, and we can take a look at the hemispheric at 144 hours. So this is day 6 here. So let me pull this in, and I'll shrink this a little bit so we can see more of it. Now, this is valid here for next Saturday. So we can see some important features here. First, this here is our Arctic oscillation. See that? Terrible. Just as Charles Barkley would say, that's just terrible. Just terrible. And you can see huge vortex on both sides of the North Pole and Baffin Island. Very strongly positive Arctic oscillation. And because this feature is here, this covers Greenland, so we have a positive NAO, or Greenland block. That's not great. We have this upper low over Alaska, so that's a positive EPO, very strongly positive, and we have no ridge on the west coast at all, that's neutral. So this is not a good pattern. Now, in terms of the stability of the pattern, it's a pretty unstable pattern, so that we have that working for it. From here is, kind of one trough in this direction, another one in this direction. It's not a lot of ridging in between, a lot of blocking, so this is an unstable pattern to say the least. But meanwhile, all the upper air features do not look great. I mean, this is day 6, and we're still not seeing things evolve as we would like to see them evolve. Okay, so now we'll go here. Yeah, this is the next slide, and you can see this is now January 5th, a week from today. So what's happened is we've had that one system move through now over here, and there's our polar vortex. So notice before it was over here, up in northwest, in this area. Notice it's coming down this way a little bit, and that's helping to establish a trough over the Midwest and the New England states. Now we still have this strong anomaly here in the Gulf of Alaska, which is not what we want to see. We need to see this feature has to be here on the west coast, and it's not. And we can see instead we have another trough over British Columbia, very clearly shown by this trough here. I'm talking about this one right here. See this trough here? That's preventing a ridge from forming on the west coast. So we're getting colder, but it's not dramatically colder. Now this upper level low here is going to bring a moderate snow to the Great Lakes in northern New England on January 5th. You can see the low right there, and it's getting moderate snow. And then the cold front, which represents the first Arctic air over the east coast in quite a while, coming down like this. That is on the Europe. That is the GFS, I believe. And then if we look at the European, there's the upper low, the surface low on Sunday, on the evening of January 5th, over northern Great Lakes and southern Ontario, that sort of thing. It's a moderate snow. It's not a big deal. Now, what happens is this feature right here, let me call it up so you can see it again, this upper low will move into southeastern Canada there, and it will become a 50-50 low. That is to say, 50 degrees north latitude 50 degrees west longitude, or very close to Newfoundland, Canada, the Canadian Maritimes. And that helps up potentially set up an event down the road. Maybe. And that event showed up on the morning, Sunday morning, European model, which showed this. So there's the wave of low pressure coming out of Louisiana, Alabama. You have high pressure over the Great Lakes, cold high pressure, and then the low tracks up the spine of the Appalachians. Now, some have argued that it's going to shift further to the east. That's not likely to happen. You can see very heavy snow, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia, western Maryland, maybe northwest Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York State, and into New England. Now, the problem with this pattern, you can see this is how it sets up here. Now, again, this here is our 50-50 low right there. That's Newfoundland, Canada. That's exactly where it is. And this is our trough. We have one piece of energy here, and the next piece is here. So these two features are going to meet over here and have a party. But there's no ridging on the west coast. The ridge is still out here by the Aleutian Islands and western Alaska. And we still have a huge anomaly, upper low, over Alaska, so which is a strongly positive NAO. So that's not what we want to see. So we have some things working for us after January 5th and 6th, but not all the ones you want to see. And then this here is January 7th. We have the Vortex is now in Baffin Island. Now that's a big step because remember, when we started out, it was over here. So now it's over here, which is a good sign. And that places the mean trough. When instead of the mean trough being on the west coast, the mean trough is now over the Great Lakes or the east coast, and we're getting colder air. Notice we are getting some flow here out of northwest Canada, finally bringing in the colder air. So it is a colder pattern after January 6th or so. And we can see what that looks like. Now, this was the afternoon update from the European model, and the main difference here is that it's got a lot less snow. Still have the low going through Kentucky, but it's not nearly as impressive as what the data was showing earlier. Now, looking beyond the event for potentially January 7th or 8th, again, is there any possibility that the system might shift further to the east? Well, let's take a look at this in some detail. Now, on this next slide, we're going to talk about the MJO, the Maddie and Julian Oscillation. So what you want to do here is, okay, again, if you aren't familiar with this is the MJO, Maddie-Julian Oscillation. So this is the GFS model, and this is where it is right now. It's 28, and follow the green line. It goes very closely, phase 8, a little bit, and then it goes into neutral circle. See that circle in the middle? That's the neutral circle. Here is the European right on phase 7, and then it goes into phase 8, and then it goes in neutral circle. And this is the Japanese model. It goes out to phase 7 fairly strongly, then into phase 8, and then into neutral circle by early January. So what this is telling us is that phase 7, maybe phase 8, and then the MJO breaks down. Well, what does that mean in terms of the overall pattern? Well, this here is the typical January pattern for phase 7. So we can see that there is some high latitude blocking here. The jet stream is probably doing this and then coming up around this huge block and then dropping down around this vortex like this. That's what the pattern is generally showing. Now, this is a nice amount of blocking here and here. If this vortex is larger or stronger, I could push the jet stream further south, and you could have potential for winter weather over the eastern United States. So that's not a bad pattern for January. For December, phase 7 is terrible. For January, it's not nearly the same. Okay. In this next slide here, this talks about phase 8, and if again, assuming that it does get into phase 8 according to the models there, we can clearly see that the pattern is it's fairly dry, except for the southern states, and you can see it's pretty cold over the entire eastern half of the country. And the reason for that is because of this pattern here. This is a huge blocking pattern over Greenland. This would be a strongly, strongly negative NAO if it were to actually occur. The Arctic oscillation will probably be neutral at this point. The EPO would be neutral. We have a little bit of a ridge here, and then generally like this sort of thing. So this could be ice storm maybe, potentially down the road. We'll see, depending how big the block is and how big this anomaly is underneath it. So it's something to watch out for, phase 8. And we can see this by some of the ocean water temperatures. Now this is the latest ocean water temperatures as sea surface temperature anomalies as of December 29th. And the key feature here we want to focus on is this blob of warm water, which has crept a little closer to the coast here, but it's still, in the Gulf of Alaska as opposed to right along the west coast. And that's, what that does is that tends to favor the trough. Let me clear this out so you can see it. That tends to favor the trough in different positions. So, in other words, it goes like this, and then it comes down, and then you end up getting some sort of ridge over the east coast. If this pool of warm water was closer to the entire west coast, then the jet stream would be favored more like that. But it's not. So that's one of the impacts here of the sea surface temperatures. And we can see that by taking a look at the reforecast models here. This is a special version of the old MRF that they run, taken, and they use it's mixed with climatology and past data. It's a little different than regular GFS, but it also gives you a useful tool for seeing trends. Now this is valid here as of January 6th, and the thing to notice here is we can see a very nice trough here. There's your vortex, a deep trough here, bringing the cold air in, some flow. But notice again the anomaly right here, folks. You see that? That's in the wrong place. This ridge supports the mean trough being here, even though the model has it on the east coast. So what that means is that when this is gone, this trough is going to re-energize over the Midwest again, which is not good for the east coast. And we can see that in the next slide. The reforecast GFS model shows that very clearly. The trough is beginning to set up here again. We're getting a bit of a southeast ridge. See that? This is January 9th, and there it is, the positive anomaly here in the Gulf of Alaska, Aleutian Islands, setting up the trough here. We need this ridge to be over here so the trough sets up there, and it's not doing it. So this right here is probably connected to that pool of really warm water in off the British Columbia coast. Those two things are connected, in my opinion. And we need to get that to move, otherwise it's nothing much is going to change. If we look at the extended, again, from the ERSL, you can see the extended ESRL, I should say, the teleconnections here for the 4 different indices. And notice that the PNA, which is the West Coast Ridge, that is way down. You can see that this is the West Coast Ridge here. This is the Greenland block. Okay, and again, what you want for winter weather and snowstorms, you want to see the positive, and you can see it isn't. It's negative. Here, it's positive, and again, what you want to see is negative. This is the Eastern Pacific Oscillation. This is when the West Coast Ridge extends up into Siberia and the North Pole. And again, what you want to see is this negative. Now, right now, it's positive, but it does show signs of going negative by the middle of January, which is a somewhat colder signal. If we look at our teleconnections, they look awful. We have the Arctic Oscillation above, takes us out to January 13th, and then we have the North American Oscillation, and you can see it's consistently strongly positive, and the NAO, some oscillations here, but generally quite positive over the next 2 weeks or so. And this here is the ensembles for the PNA, and you can see consistently negative, and of course this is the EPO, which again allows the ridge over the west coast to build up to the Arctic Circle or Siberia. And here it's very positive, which is very bad news for winter weather lovers, but it turns somewhat negative here late in the middle of December. So again, that might be something to look out for. But again, we have a lot of problems in this overall pattern. Now this image here shows the day 10 European model, and you can see that the vortex is pretty strong and it's fairly active, so that's a good sign for establishing cold air. We even have a bit of a trough here, but we also have this mean trough here, and notice the positive anomalies again. That's where the warm water is in the Gulf of Alaska and the North Central Pacific, and that places our mean trough here over the west coast on the Rockies. So that has been the problem with winter so far. Now, if we take a look at January 13th and both of these models, again, you can see that both models have the ridge over the west coast. See, I mean, the trough over the west coast. See that? There and here. Both models have the strong positive anomaly here. Okay, that's fine. And you can see that the trough here is right over the west coast. And there's a bit of a ridge over the southeastern states. on both of these. Not much, but a little bit. So this is January 13th. So after we cut a cold blast that comes through, the models are kind of shifting the pattern back. And one of the reasons is because all these MJO models don't hold it. We need to keep these MJOs here in phase 8 and phase 1 and phase 2. And so far, we're not seeing that. It barely gets into phase 8 and then it collapses. And that's hurting the overall forecast process. There's no doubt about that. So now, before you give up all hope, the one last thing I wanted to, remind you of is this here is the latest QBO. Okay, so this is our latest QBO projections here. This is December 25, and this is September 14th. So this is our QBO here, Q, B, O, quasi-biennial oscillation. Now this is the equator right here. So what we want to look at is we want to see the winds go close to neutral or negative as it can. And if you look at the dark blue here, light blue here, that's around 0 here, maybe -2. So it looks like the -2 winds are just beginning to reach the QBO area over the equator. Now, when that happens, that would make the pattern more favorable for blocking patterns to develop. So this could be a good trend down the road. So we'll see if that actually works out. All right, folks, this is meteorologist DT here from Weather Risk. I'll talk to you soon. I'll see you on the Facebook page and on the new Twitter page and, of course, on the website.